Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Win 911 webinar for December. Today we'll be discussing creating custom alarm formats. So a quick rundown of today's webinar. First, we'll be going over XML and XSL to give you some background about the languages. After that, we'll walk you through what you can edit in each SCADA and what is different for formatting. At the end there, we'll walk you through live formatting for some typical format questions we have, including your date, time, reordering, alarm attributes, and stylings. At the end, we'll have time for some questions and answers. For those of you rewatching this webinar, it will be available on win911.com under resources and webinars. It'll take you to a link to a YouTube channel, and you can also go back and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And at the bottom here, I'll make specific bookmarks for the web link that talks about specific parts of the webinar. For example, the formatting section, if you want to just watch that, you have links down here in the comment section. From here, I'll go over and pass it to Cody. He's going to talk about the introduction to XML and XSL, followed by the live demonstration.
Thanks, Brian. A note before I begin, I will be discussing a technical topic. If you're not a technical audience, don't worry. My main goal today is to express to you what's possible with this technology. I hope to get some ideas turning in your heads, and if you can't quite follow along and keep up, don't worry about the details. You can always rewatch this video and find other information online. Please just try and follow the conversation and focus on what's technically possible. All right, so beginning here, we need to have a little bit of background on a markup language called XML and a style sheet language called XSL. Now, in the world of tech, anything older than a couple of weeks old is ancient, and XML is certainly ancient and ancient. That's not to say it's obsolete, but XML is certainly something that's ubiquitous and available for digestion a lot of different places. So I had a little fun with the slides. I hope you'll forgive me. What is XML? Extensible Markup Language XML was created in order to keep all the information in the world intelligible, structured, and easily parsed by both humans and machines. It's an object modeling language, and you can use it to capture the details, the attributes, the individual data items of anything, from a water tank to an entire lift station or well pump or a bank account, and certainly it's a very powerful language for object modeling. So consider, for this example, an automobile dealer with a large inventory of the latest Studebaker, Packard, and Oldsmobile models. Could you use XML to store information on the cars in his lot? Absolutely. So here's an example schema, what's called a schema in XML, a capture of that object. So from a simplified point of view, a vehicle is a set of information. It's the year of manufacturing, the make and model. So the year, make, and model of a vehicle could be captured as individual data attributes of a vehicle belonging to an inventory. And so in this XML snippet, you see a header at the top. It just says that this is XML. And then you see the first extensible item, which is inventory. We're defining what an inventory is. An inventory is a collection of vehicles. Then we see a vehicle tag, and we're defining again what a vehicle is. A vehicle is a collection of a year, make, and model. And then each vehicle in this collection has those details expressed as strings, a serialized representation of their year, make, and model. So I've got a 1956 Packard Pacific, a 1955 Studebaker Champion, a 54 Studebaker Starlight, a 57 Oldsmobile 88, and so forth in my collection. But I could certainly get an object that was richer than that. And you can imagine creating a vehicle with many, many more bits of data, specifications about the chassis, about the dimensions of the vehicle, about the fuel type. And all of that information may be relevant for other particular purposes. And so what one person considers a vehicle inventory may differ from what another person considers as a vehicle inventory. And what particular bits of data are relevant for a task at hand could certainly change. But it's important to take away that XML is this very extensible markup language that lets you model an object with really the level of complexity that you need. So now imagine searching and navigating all of that XML. So there's two technologies that come into play here, XQuery and XPath. We'll see how XSL builds upon XQuery and XPath. But the basic idea is if I have all of this XML stored somewhere, that I would like to perform some sort of query against it, and I don't necessarily need special built software for that. If I know that the data, that the object is represented in XML, if I had a general purpose technology like XQuery, then I could perform a query against that without having to write specialized codes for that specific schema. And then finally, XPath, which is a way of pointing to particular points, particular data fields of that object model, particular attributes of the object. XSL started off as a technology for moving from one XML schema to another. So I mentioned that a car inventory for a dealer may look very different from a car inventory for a car manufacturer. And so moving from one set of data and its representation to another requires some sort of transform. And XSL was developed as a transform to allow XML as an input to go to a different schema of XML as an output. And it quickly expanded beyond that to really any kind of output you could want, whether it's plain text or rich HTML, or speech synthesis markup language. Anything that can be represented as text at all can be the output of an XSL transform. All right, so let's dive into a couple of the tools in the XSL toolbox here. And the very first one is a selection operator. XSL offers a selection operator called value of. And this allows a selection of a particular attribute within the object model. So here I have a couple examples. If I'm interested in the year of a vehicle, then I can say XSL value of select, and then I use XPath there to navigate down to the particular attribute I'm interested in. And so the convention for that is the tag name with joined together with a forward slash, similar to a file path in an operating system. So I want to find the inventory, and underneath the inventory, I want to go into the vehicle. Under the vehicle, I want to find the year, and that's what I'm selecting is just the year, whatever's inside that year tag. So to go back a bit to my inventory, just for an example, the first vehicle's first year there is 1956. I can also imagine going to inventory, vehicle, fuel, miles per gallon there in that extended inventory example, and I would fetch the value 16 from that. And that's all well and good, particularly if you have an XML blob that is a single object. But many XML blobs are really a collection. They are a set of information. And certainly within an object, even if you only had one vehicle there, you could imagine a set of seats or a set of wheels on the vehicle. So within a particular object, the object itself can contain collections. And so it's important to have an enumeration operator, an iteration operator, and XSL provides that in the form of for each, which allows enumeration over a collection. And so I can combine those two and say for each inventory vehicle, let me select the year. And you'll notice that the path within that nested select becomes relative. So the inventory vehicle is already the scope. And as I'm selecting within inventory vehicle just the year. And so the output on that inventory that I presented earlier for this statement would simply be 1956 plus 1955 plus 1954 plus 1957 and so on. That plus is coming from that dangling plus outside the select statement. and that's just a constant bit of text. Now, enumerating over an entire collection is fine, but there's certainly cases where you want to skip certain items and take only a portion, a subset of that set. And so the for each operator does support filtering. So the first example here is filtering the vehicles with the make of Studebaker and selecting the year of all of my Studebakers in that collection. So you see that the path there has been augmented with this square brace syntax. And again, those are the sort of the technical details of XSL here. You can use a square brace syntax to filter out the particular attribute properties you're interested in. The second example there is looking at the year and saying, I'm interested in the make of all vehicles from the year 1956. And so the output of that against my sample would be, I have two Studebakers, Studebaker, Studebaker. Oh, one quick note for technical, the year ampersand LT semicolon, that's just a bit of technical detail. The ampersand LT semicolon is the representation of less than. So I'm asking for the year less than 1956, not equal to 1956, not greater than. You can probably guess greater than would be GT, but if I need to represent less than or greater than, in order to avoid confusion with the language markup itself, which uses less than and greater than to open and close tags, less than and greater than are represented that way. XSL offers also sorting, so being able to sort by particular attributes. And so in this example, the inventory can be sorted by year. And then once that collection has been sorted, we can select off the year and the make so that we can have as output 1954 Studebaker, 1955 Studebaker, 1956 Packard, and 1957 Oldsmobile. But beyond that, it gets really interesting with conditional statements. So the XSL language itself allows for conditional logic. And it does that primarily in the form of an if. And so here we see within my enumeration over my vehicles in my inventory, I can do a selection, and I can also do a conditional selection or conditional output. And the test I'm doing here is saying, when the fuel mile per gallon is greater than 18, let's output the static text fuel saver. So we can say that the 1955 Studebaker, that is an eco-friendly car. It gets more than 18 miles per gallon, and so that is our fuel saver. XSL offers a choose command as well. That's conditional logic with an alternate. So we can say when some test is true, in this case the miles per gallon being greater than 17, let's use fuel saver. And otherwise, you see that tag XSL otherwise, then we'll proclaim the car to be well built. So within the choose you have a when clause and an otherwise clause. And that basically takes the place of if else, which is more common in other programming languages. So when otherwise is analogous to if else. And here we see the output. The Studebaker is marked as well built. The second Studebaker is marked as a fuel saver. The Packard's a well built car. And then the Oldsmobile is a fuel saver. It also has the word new in front of it. And that's up at the top of this XSL statement. It says after the sort, I've used an if to say if the year happens to be greater than 1956, let's prepend this record with new. And the ampersand in BSP, that's a technical way to say non-breaking space. So without a line break, without the ability to break the line, new 1957 Oldsmobile fuel saver. All right, so I think that's a good enough overview of what's possible with the tools, and hopefully that example is general enough that you could follow along and understand. Let's turn our attention now to the kinds of objects that we deal with, namely alarm events and reports, and what's available there for your format digestion. So every alarm event that arrives within Win911 can be serialized into what we call an alarm event. And it's important to recognize that that alarm event could have come from a number of SCADA packages that we connect to. So there isn't a specific reflection of one SCADA package or another here. This is a generalized object. And so we'll see that every SCADA can be accommodated by this generalized object, but we do need to understand the object itself and how to map from the SCADA attributes into this general object. So looking at this table and using the InTouch Edge HMI as an example, let's just go through the various properties that are on an alarm event. So an alarm event contains an alarm lifetime ID. The alarm lifetime ID uniquely identifies an alarm from the time that it goes active until the time that it becomes both inactive and acknowledged. And so that ID is usually a GUID. In the case of InTouch Edge HMI, it's the tag name plus its type plus its start time. The active time is the next property of the alarm, and that is a date time at which the alarm first went active. It transitioned from the terminal state into an active alarm. And that should be consistent for the life of the alarm. The next thing is actually a section. So the alarm section encapsulates the details that are particular to the alarm point. So not, if you imagine a water tank with perhaps a high alarm, a low alarm, maybe a deviation or a rate of change alarm on it. At the end of the day, that water tank is still the point that hosts all of those alarm conditions. And so here by alarm, we're talking about the alarm point, and that alarm point has a native ID. That's typically a tag name, a block name, an object name from the SCADA. In the case of InTouch Edge, that's the tag name plus type. And that alarm has two human-readable descriptions. One is short, and we call that the name, and the other is the description, which can be more verbose. The name is a friendly name, and typically in Win911, we offer the ability to alias your tag with a friendly name. So as you define tag objects within Win911, we talk about their tag ID or tag name, and that can be the computer syntax, but then we also offer this name field where you can deviate from that. And if after an import, you can certainly change that and end up with a friendlier name. We also typically offer a description field where you can provide that description. Of course, these items can also come from the SCADA. And so where possible, Win911 will always pull these from the SCADA and then offer you the ability in the configuration to override what's coming in from the SCADA. In the case of InTouch Edge, there is no description that's provided by the toolkit. So in InTouch Edge, that's going to come entirely from Win911, and on our project tag description within that configuration, you'll be able to define the description for this alarm. Yeah. The area, this is how the SCADA organizes the alarm points. And so whether they call that an area or group or locale, this is the native organization level. In InTouch Edge, they call that a group. And so we will put the InTouch Edge group in our area. Then we have some details about the connection, the server, and the first is the source name. So we're talking about the particular server connection, In the case that Win911 can connect to multiple servers, each server is going to have a name. And so the name as configured in Win911 for the Web Studio project, that's what we're going to use as the source name here. And if you had multiple projects defined within Win911, this source name would reflect the project on which this alarm point was configured. The system and subsystem reflect the Win911 environment on which these sources are executing. And the source type reflects what SCADA package is being utilized. So that's going to be InTouch Edge HMI or GEI Fix or Rockwell Factory Talk, this sort of thing. The next section is for the alarm condition. So that's the particular high alarm or the particular deviation alarm. And that condition likewise has a name and description. Again, those are going to come from the SCADA wherever possible, and we usually offer the ability to override those within the Win911 configuration. The name is short, and so here we're using the InTouch Edge HMI type mapped to a friendly string. So the type comes in as a sort of a number, and we'll map that to high, 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 low, 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 rate, DEV plus or DEV minus in the case of InTouch Edge. The description is the alarm description, and from InTouch Edge that comes in as what they call the message. So within their SCADA package they have a message. We'll use that as our description for the alarm condition. And then the category. The category of the alarm is typically whether it's a level alarm or a deviation alarm, and we can use the type in its raw form in the case of InTouch Edge HMI to represent the category. The native severity is an important distinction from the severity. Within Win911, we have to handle alarm events from multiple SCADAs, and so we need to generalize their concept of importance so that when a phone line becomes available, we know which alarm to dial out first. Some SCADA packages may have high, medium, low. Others may have 1 through 5 or 0 through 1,000. So the native severity is always captured and available on the object as a string. And then we map that in a SCADA-specific way to a general severity. And so for Win911, our severities fall within 0 to 1,000, 1,000 being the highest. In InTouch, that means is we need to take their sense of priority, multiply it by a factor of 3.92, and subtract it by 1,000 in order to scale and invert that to a generalized severity. And so it's important to know both of these are available on the alarm event. I would say not one of our most common, but certainly a common case for custom format is to express the native severity instead of the generalized severity. And so knowing that both of those are there, I think is a critical piece. A condition certainly has a limit. So if you have a high alarm, whenever it's above 80 gallons, 80 would be your limit. And the limit type in that case could be 80, probably a number. Could be a string, could be a floating point. But that's there. And this is a C#.NET type representation. So you could utilize that to say, well, if the limit type is floating point, then maybe I want to spit out the limit formatted to 2 decimal places. The limit operator in that case would be greater than. And in the case of InTouch Edge HMI, that actually does not come across, but many SCADA packages do provide us with both the limit operator, and engineering units. All right, the next section is the VTQ, the value, timestamp, and quality. The timestamp being the event time for this particular alarm event. The value being the process variable value associated with this alarm point or this particular condition. And the quality representing the SCADA's concept of quality for that value. So whether that value can be trusted or not. And in the world of InTouch Edge, HMI, and others, that value is always good if we're connected. The next section is something called state, and this represents the classic state flags for the alarm event. The key ones are, is the alarm active or not? Is the alarm acknowledged or not? Is the alarm suppressed or not? And then we have a set of change flags. So for each state flag, we have whether or not it's changed when compared to the previous alarm event. So whether the change act bit was changed, whether the active bit was changed, and so forth. And those are calculated internally in the case of InTouch Edge. And other SCADA packages, we're provided change flags. There's a section for attachments, and the actor and comment. Now, technically, every alarm event wears an actor and a comment, and usually those are only populated once the alarm becomes acknowledged. So the actor is typically only the person who acknowledged the alarm. And then the comment is the ACK comment. So in the case of InTouch Edge HMI, that's a username that's coming from InTouch Edge, and a comment that's coming from InTouch Edge. And that's generally the alarm event. So formats are available for all SCADAs. I will say that in our CAN formats, we have generally provided short and verbose variations, as well as what we call condition variations. So some SCADA packages really emphasize the alarm condition, others really emphasize the alarm point. And so often it's a good idea to switch over to the condition formats, short condition, long condition type formats, if you're dealing with a SCADA package that really emphasizes the condition. I did want to point out that you can find on our website the alarm property mapping for every SCADA package. So if you'll go to win91.com under Resources, Documentation, under the Win91 Standard Interactive Advanced Product, Manuals, there is an alarm property mapping. And this just fleshes out this table beyond InTouch Edge to the various SCADA packages we support. So you can find where the alarm description is coming from for factory talk, or where the value is coming from for simplicity, that sort of thing. All right. The other piece I wanted to point out on the Win91 website is under Support Knowledge Base. There we have formats alarm property mapping by SCADA, and that's another view of that same data. In that knowledge base, you can also find some custom formats that have been requested from users. So it's a good place to look if you're trying to do something you think is pretty common. Maybe that solution already exists on our knowledge base, and you won't have to think about it and solve it. You can just take what's there. Okay. So at this point, I wanted to step away from the slides and actually go to our UI and show you some live demonstrations of editing these XSL formats in order to accomplish some basic tasks. Most commonly, we get requests to adjust the date time format, that is, and that could be for localization. That could also be because of in my process, it's important to see the seconds on the time. In my process, it's important to see the date on the time. In my process, it's important to use a 24-hour clock or a 12-hour clock. So by far, the most common solution that we're asked to provide is how do I adjust the date time for my particular format. So I'll go over that. I'm also going to go over reordering attributes. So the idea of, how do I put the alarm name up at the top? How do I move this particular description down to the bottom, or move the value after the engineering units, that sort of thing. I want to talk about editing static content and also the output styling. So let me move to that. All right, so each notifier within Win911 includes a format workspace. And you'll see that we've provided many canned formats here. Email is probably the most complex, and so I'm going to start there. And it's most complex because it has both subjects that can be formatted and email bodies that can be formatted. And it supports both rich content in terms of HTML output and plain text output. So I wanted to quick look at a short text format for the alarm body. And here we see what this alarm looks like with a preview just from our sort of dummy alarm. It says Win911 alert, pump station number 5, tank number 42, below a safe level is active and act. Event time 9:53:45 a.m. It goes on to list the area, the name, the condition, the value, the severity, act by, actor, and comment. So, first things first, let's look at the time. So I'll start by creating a copy of this. Give it a unique name, custom time. And the event time here you'll see is being selected, and the value of that selection is being fed actually into a local function called Spectre local time. We could have done something more custom, but Microsoft has a very good date time format technology. You can simply search for date time format strings and find that they've built up a rather powerful lexicon of date time formatting. And if I'm interested in the time of an alarm, I can use capital T. That would represent just the time aspect, not the date aspect, and it would represent that in a localized manner. If I wanted just the date instead, I could flip that over to maybe lowercase d, which is the short date format, and save this. And my new custom time now will have an event time that shows me my date, 3/20/2013 in this case. So with a simple change to that date time format string, I'm really able to represent that timestamp in any manner that I want to. Let me jump back over here to editing. I'll show you that there's some other options here. So I could do something more like month, day, year, and get the 4-digit representation of a year. And that works just as well. Oh, you know what I've done there? I can also, let me jump over to Microsoft's resources for this, and I'll just show you. They have what they call standard datetime format strings and custom datetime format strings. So the standard datetime format strings that are available are one-letter specifiers, and they give examples. So for English US, if you're looking for a short datetime format, if you're looking for a month-day pattern, if you're looking for something with just the time, all of these are available here. And then custom date and time format strings. If you don't like any of those, which typically most people will like one of those, there is the ability to specify down to particular pieces of the date-time structure, fractions of the second, the AM, PM specifier, the month, the day of the week, etc. So I guess I'll leave it at that and just say, know that anything you would want to do with the date time can certainly be done, and that we've adopted just the standard Microsoft format specifiers here for the particular date time structure. Reordering. So looking at this, I have my event time near the top, and I have my severity closer to the bottom. I can imagine someone wanting that severity closer to the top and the event time closer to the bottom. So let me show you quickly how that can be rearranged. So I'm just scanning this looking for the severity, and I find it here. I find the select statement that's getting my notification event, alarm event, condition severity. And this next line is just static text that's saying carriage return line feed, XD, XA. So I can copy those, or rather cut those. And actually I'm going to need, just above it here is this labeled as static text severity colon. So I'm going to need all three of those lines. I'll cut those from down there and I'll move them up here. So now it says when now when alert, severity, and whatever my severity is, and then goes into the alarm. Likewise, my event time, I can take those pieces and move those further down. Maybe I put those after the value. And so now you see the severity near the top of the output, and you see the event time closer to the bottom. So reordering, I think, is another common request we have. Not just reordering, but saying, well, this CAN format is pretty close. I just want to add this one more piece to it, or I just want to get rid of this one piece here. So hopefully by moving, you see how I could easily add one more piece or subtract one piece from this format output. But that's as easy as that. Editing static content. So in the world of text, that's very easy. So I have that text there that says when I won't alert. Maybe I am the city of West Haven, and I want to point out that I have an alarm for the city of West Haven and replace that static text. Maybe instead of severity, my organization utilizes, the term importance. I can change that. So static text inside of a text output, that XSL text, it's as easy as changing, adding new things. I could also imagine adding something like instructions to an operator. I can just create a new XSL text block, and maybe near the end of the event, say, please refer to SOP 3456. And you can imagine making that text conditional, saying that anything that's a water alarm, I want to make sure I make this note. Anything that's an electrical alarm, make this note. Anything that's a safety alarm, I want to make sure I throw this in there. And as that updates, we'll see I've got my City of West Haven alarm at the top now. I've replaced my label for severity with the word importance. And down at the bottom, I've got that note to operators to refer to SOP 3456. Okay. Let me jump over to HTML now. And so if I look at our HTML short format, you'll see that this is a much richer view. I've got colors going on here. I'm representing active as a red box and act as a black rectangle. If it were unact, that would be red. I've got the ability to do these sort of colors and bigger fonts and font colors and headers and a table structure with a nice set of columns there. HTML is itself a markup language, so it includes all of those styling details. And so XSL can transform that same alarm event into an HTML output, which includes not just the content, but also its styling. So let me create a copy of this one. And I'll call this HTML custom. And here you see that same standard date time. This is just a convenience, all the canned formats that we build in. We try and put this local time function at the top so that you can quickly and easily adjust your date time formats in one place. So here I see a HTML output, and I see that I have a head section and a body. Don't worry too much if you're not an HTML expert. You see that there's a title there I can change, and the body contains a table. And I wanted to show how HTML includes things like table colors, background colors. So I can change my table style here and represent the background color not as white, but let's do just the polar opposite of that and say I'm going to do a black table. And I'll do white text on a black table. See also this font declaration, Segoy UI, falling back to Helvetica, falling back to sans serif. I've got my table style with my padding, so I can adjust things like the margin or padding of the table style. I'll go ahead and make this text here even bigger, and so I'm going to move it from 24 point up to 36 point. And I'll go ahead and change the color from our Win91 red to, let's just do a blue. Cyan there. All right. And likewise, I can make conditional columns appear. I can do things like changing my color based on a condition. So that's in fact what we're doing in this format is when the notification event, alarm event state is active, is true, then I'll do red, and otherwise I'm doing black. Likewise here, the is active. When that's true, I'm putting the text ACTIVE, and otherwise I'm doing inactive. So I can change that static text and say maybe not active. Let's have a quick peek at that. Once that renders the preview. And so you see my background has certainly changed. My colors have changed there. Unfortunately, I picked the wrong active. I said not active, and the demo alarm there is in the active state. But you get the idea. And so we can adjust not just the colors, but the font sizes, the layout, all of that comes with the style marking for HTML, including embedding, company letterheads and images. And so there's certainly a lot of possibilities there for rich content within the HTML emails. Mobile is more of a text format. SMS is, of course, limited to text output. And voice is actually output in terms of SSML, which includes some markup language there to guide the speech engine, things like pitch and prosody, emphasis. So that is typically outputting something like a plain text with some little embellishments. And so that's really all I wanted to cover. I think we'll switch over to, and these practices I should mention, they're exactly the same for across all the notifiers. The various format workspaces exist. I can show you SMS has a format workspace. And like I said, there are long and short versions that we've built. There are condition and non-condition formats. So if you're dealing with a SCADA packages, it really focuses on the alarm condition. Long condition format and condition format are better options for you. But hopefully there's a starting point at least that's close to what you're interested in. And the amount of tweaking that you have to do is limited. Of course, I hope I've given you enough to get started in the right direction. And if you should need any assistance in creating a custom format, we're certainly here to help. At this point, I'm going to turn it over for questions.
Yeah, so thank you for everyone for joining our webinar today.